It's good to see everybody. We're here for our August 20th version of the Community Development Committee meeting, and we'll start the way we do every month by introducing ourselves and saying who we represent.
I'm Scott Coner with District 11, which is Stanton, the town of Star Prairie, and the village of Star Prairie.
Ed Schockner, District 1, which is the village of Somerset and the north part of the town of Somerset.
Judy Ochterhoff, District 17, which is Silen, Deer Park, Emerald, Forest, Glenwood, and Glenwood City.
I'm Dan Hansen, District 12, which is part of New Richmond and part of Star Prairie Township.
Ellen Denzer, Community Development Director.
I'm Ken Witt, the Interim County Administrator.
We also have Bill Peavy here, and we have David Osnes here as well, supervisors. So let's go ahead and do public comment. First up would be Virginia Draft.
I wouldn't have done that. Hello, my name is Virginia Drath from Emerald Township. I'm going to read first a public comment that Barb Nelson sent in, and she says, I, like many others, care about our environment. The air we breathe, the water we drink affects our health. Water, especially clean water, is essential to life and health. We all expect clean water to come out of our taps, but when that doesn't happen, then what? Rural communities have private wells, no governmental entity to ensure water safety. Due to the unique geology and karst topography in parts of our county, a CAFO can pose significant risk to surface and groundwater and thus human health. There is growing evidence that CAFOs pose health and environmental risks and negative impacts for CAFO workers, nearby residents, and communities. Although animal manure is an invaluable fertilizer, quantities accumulated at a CAFO have been known to be spread at rates or volumes exceeding the farmland to absorb it, further risking surface and groundwater pollution, as has been evidenced in the town of Emerald. Storage systems are vulnerable to breaches due to age, heavy rainfall, and flood events, which are of concern given recent extreme weather events, which are predicted to increase in frequency and severity in the coming decades. Rising nitrate levels in drinking water, exposure to air pollution, and she said, I invite you to drive east past Highway 63 on County Road G and take some deep breaths. It can cause, exacerbate respiratory conditions are also concerns. Not only do the environmental and physical health impacts need to be examined, but what about the economic and social implications? These risks are also too great to ignore. CAFO regulation and enforcement has not adequately protected the public's health to date. These are some of the reasons I encourage the Community Development Committee and the County Board to support the resolution to enact a 2-year moratorium on the new construction or expansion of existing concentrated animal feeding operations and to establish a large-scale livestock study committee to research and analyze their implications. This ties in directly to recommendations from the 2017 Ground and Surface Water Study. Thank you. Barb Nelson, 2568 County Road G, Emerald, Wisconsin.
Ginny, just by way of explanation, Ginny agreed to read the public comments from 2 other people who also had similar comments to her own because they were emailed to me, the chair, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to be heard. So thank you, Ginny, and she'll read one more comment and then her own.
Okay, this is from Carol Harden, and she lives in Hudson. Yeah. She says, Hello, Dan. Please submit my comments at the meeting tonight. I very much support the moratorium. After considerable research on factory farms, I have found that it is quite clear that at the very least we must protect our water. For that and many more reasons, I urge that the board pass the resolution for a moratorium so that they can take the time to consider all the threats that expanding factory farming pose to our health and well-being. I've said it before and will say it again. Nothing good comes from CAFOs. Respectfully submitted, Carol Hardin Hudson. And my own, first I would like to thank Cole Webster, Max Erickson, and Tim Stieber, all from Community Development Department, for promptly responding to my call to evaluate a new hole in my yard that has appeared since the July storm. It measures 8 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, and 2.5 to 3 feet deep, and has areas surrounding it that appear to be what they said was a sinkhole. When the words excavating equipment are spoken, I see dollar signs ahead. This hole is a reminder that much of St. Croix is on karst geology. I was able to show Cole and Max other sinkholes within 3 miles of me. And somebody told me yesterday that another family had to tear off a porch off their house because of a sinkhole. Secondly, this bottle of brown water is from the well of a friend 2 miles away from me. She was getting brown water last month, had a new pump and new pipes put in as well as the water treated, and now the brown water has returned as of last week. It was serviced and tested and treated again, and it showed bacteria, but no E. coli. She also is looking at dollar signs. Thirdly, I would like you to support the Bayfield County resolution for a 2-year statewide moratorium on new or expanding CAFOs. Wisconsin Green Fire report this year states that water treatment and well replacement do not deal with the cause of nitrate contaminated water. The cost of end-of-pipe treatments will be far more expensive as unsafe water grows. More recent evidence makes clear that increased nitrate levels pose health risks for adults of all ages as well as infants. Increased nitrate exposure includes hematologic and cardiovascular disorders, elevated cancer risks including bladder, ovarian, and thyroid. On Tuesday evening this week, a citizen at the Polk County Government Center told me that Polk County's Health and Human Service Department is supporting this resolution. And I've heard that La Crosse area and Eau Claire area, they are also talking about this resolution. To have clean water and air, we need scientific solutions equal to the magnitude of the problem, not regulations drafted in big egg boardrooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Draft. Right now we're going to do, we have a public hearing to reduce the structure setback on a lot from 100 feet to 50, what? Yes, sir?
I have 3 public comments.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Let's do Linda Hendricks, Beth Wood, and Kim Duprey. I apologize.
Okay, Linda Hendricks, if you're watching, you're getting a phone call. It's a 10-second delay, so they may or may not hear me.
Hello?
Hello, Linda. You're on live with the Community Development Committee. You'd requested a phone call for public comment.
Okay, great.
All right, so you're live. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Linda Hendricks. I'm from New Richmond, Wisconsin, St. Croix County. I am concerned about the Iowan hog farms coming into Polk and Burnett counties upriver and the effect that they may very well have on the St. Croix County on the St. Croix watershed. I'm also concerned that if Cumberland LLC decides not to set up house in Polk and Burnett, that they might try coming here to St. Croix next. We need to prepare for this. First off, I would like to see the county support Bayfield's 2-year CAFO moratorium resolution, which is being proposed to the Wisconsin Counties Association. Secondly, I'd like to see a tough operations ordinance put in place with the express purpose of making St. Croix County undesirable to hog farms, but also to hold these huge corporations accountable for their potential environmental risks to animals, people, land, water, and air. I believe any ordinance should require CAFOs to install groundwater monitoring wells and air quality monitoring stations. There should be an agreement that these costs, plus any spill cleanup and or contaminated well replacement of neighboring properties, plus all additional legal fees, would be at the company's expense. St. Croix County's recent June 8th water sampling of Lakefront Beach in Hudson showed an advisory E. coli level of 345 when normal is 0 to 234. This is before hog farms come into the watershed. We need to protect our drinking water, lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands, as well as property values from the devastating effects of factory farms. This is an out-of-state company that does not care what happens here in St. Croix County, Wisconsin. We must do what we can to keep them out and away from our beautiful communities and St. Croix watershed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. All right, next up is Beth Wood.
Beth Wood speaking.
Hi, Beth. This is Ken Witt. You are on live with the Community Development Committee. You are live for public comment.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a public comment on voting agenda item number 8133. I'm sorry, it's 8113 is the voting agenda item. I am in support of St. Croix County passing a resolution using the language of the Bayfield County CAFO moratorium. The work has been done. We do not have to incur the cost of creating a resolution. We only need the political will to make it happen. The taxpayers of St. Croix County need assurance that our watershed and our access to clean water is going to be protected. At this time, it's my understanding that Emerald Dairy is operating without a current permit. This large-scale animal factory has on more than one occasion violated the public safety of the residents of St. Croix County by unreported contamination of the watershed adjacent to the CAFO. It's my understanding that Emerald Dairy is now operating without a valid permit and, in fact, is looking to increase the size of its operation. My question is, what is the county board going to do to protect the taxpayers from further contamination of their water? And what ethical obligation does the county board have to ensure that all residents of St. Croix County are protected from noncompliance by CAFO operations? Our entire watershed is fragile and it's vulnerable to contamination. Any other business would have to shut down if it was non-compliant or if it did not have the proper permit. Any other business would have to shut down if it was proven to put the lives of taxpayers at risk. Contaminated wells, a contaminated watershed, those are public health risks. The job of our county board is to protect the taxpayers from future health risks and to protect our access to clean, healthy water. Please vote to adopt the Bayfield County CAFO moratorium. Thanks so much for your time this evening.
Thank you. All right, and the last one that I have is Kim Duprey.
Kim.
Hi, Kim. You are on live with the Community Development Committee. This is your chance for
Thank you
public
very much.
comment.
I just wanted to commend the staff work on all their water testing and tracking. That public education piece is just so important. As we learned in Emerald in 2017, the contamination of water is not always obvious. There was no difference in the smell, taste, or color when a cluster of homes discovered they had E. coli in their well water. It was only after some visiting family turned ill unexpectedly that prompted the homeowner to test their well water just to rule it out. That's when the E. coli was discovered. So I wanted to thank all the staff for your hard work on that to date. I do still have concerns, though, that St. Croix doesn't have a livestock operations ordinance these 3 years after the Groundwater Committee finished their work. As you've heard, Emerald Sky has applied to double their size, and there are industrial hog producers out of Iowa looking to expand in Wisconsin. So if St. Croix doesn't have protections in place very soon, our citizens could be living in a sacrifice zone and lose their quality of life, their clean air and water, and their property values. I have traveled to several surrounding counties over the past 4 years, telling the story of the hard lessons we all learned over Emerald Sky's massive manure spill. I explained to them the ways that St. Croix was intimidated, deceived, and disregarded, how Emerald Sky promised to be good neighbors, how Emerald Sky threatened a lawsuit if St. Croix passed a moratorium, and then 10 days later had an enormous spill of 275,000 gallons that they did not report to DNR for nearly 100 days, and only an anonymous tip revealed that violation. I've also told other counties how their potential $1 million fine for this was reduced to only $80,000, and how they have continued to violate their permits with little or no consequences. So what I've told other counties is you need to protect yourselves from the bad actors. Don't expect any help from Madison, Washington, or EPA. As with any profession, there are good and honest business people, and then there are the less than honest ones. We have laws in our society not just for honest folks, but to protect the honest folks from those who are less than honest. It's no different with industrial ag producers. So you need a livestock operations ordinance to protect your citizens from bad players, of which you already have one in your midst. Other counties have learned from your experiences, and I hope you would too. So I ask for your support for the Bayfield Ordinance to Wisconsin Counties Association, as well as an expedited diligence in getting a livestock operation ordinance in place before other communities suffer, as Emerald has suffered. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Very good. If you can hear me, thank you all, everybody that called in. Now, we will go to our public hearing to reduce the structure setback on the lot from 100 feet to 50 feet along County Road T pursuant to Section 1310B1 of the St. Croix County Land Division Ordinance, Town of Hammond, and we'll ask for a staff report. Mr. Wozniak.
Good evening, committee members. You have on your agenda this evening a setback waiver request from Susan Bork. This request involves property at 1782 96th Ave in the town of Hammond. That would be lot 58 of Pheasant Hills First Edition in section 16, again in the town of Hammond. Included with the materials you've been provided are the staff report and an application. Let me actually find my way to it. Pardon. Jumped over it. Okay. There we go. bit.
Yep, there's the minus. See it? Try that.
There we go.
All right, now slide this. There you go. Oops.
There we go. Okay. We have, on this item, we included in the staff report a usual slide that includes a history of structure setback lines. I'm not going to read through all of this because I know you've seen it before. I would note that in terms of the role of the committee, the Community Development Committee processes setback reduction requests to remove the setback on the map of record through a public hearing with a Class 2 notice. The process notifies the affected town and adjoining property owners directly. This allows the committee to hear from neighboring residents and the town board if there are objections to a structure with a reduced setback when structures on adjoining lots are set back the full 100 feet from the road right-of-way, thereby changing the look of the street or subdivision. These relate to, this reduction relates to a process outlined in the Land Division Ordinance, Section 13.10. Again, I would note that the applicant's request is to reduce the structure setback requirement from 100 feet to 50 feet. And this is only applicable along County Road T because the plat actually, 96th actually only shows a 50-foot setback in the recorded plat. So the fact that they want to build closer than the 100 feet with an accessory building to County Road T also reinforces that that's the road that they need the setback reduction from. And they would be required to have a correction instrument prepared by a registered land surveyor, recorded with the Register of Deeds, noting the removal of the existing structure setback as shown on the recorded lot. Just pull up a slide quickly. The site plan included with the staff report indicates up in the northwest corner the location of the proposed accessory building with County Road T to the east and 96th Avenue to the south. And the topography of the lot in this case dictates the need. There's a drainage swale that really kind of wraps around the back of the house from drainage from the north and carries water basically along the south property boundary. And based on location, the sanitary system, and again the topography throughout the lot, the only logical place to do the accessory building is really in the area that the applicant wishes to build. There's limited availability of building area, again, due to the aforementioned issues I've referenced. And I would note that location of the proposed structure would not interfere with highway sight lines for visibility. The site drops off from County T, and so the pad for the accessory building would sit significantly lower than the road. And also to the north, along County T, the property to the north has a row of pine trees that are essentially, would actually affect sight lines along County T more than this proposed structure would. Just a couple photos. Looking east from actually where the dwelling is located, if I could just refer back to this, looking to either the southeast or I think directly east, these two photos during a wet period indicate the kind of water that ponds, puddles on the lot. So essentially, there's a need to find elevation-wise, topographically, a higher spot on the lot to build, and that relates to the nature of the applicant's request. These are also a couple photos looking really from the home looking south, and again, the water carries along the swale along 96th, and in an area that would be within the 50-foot setback requirement. Wouldn't be buildable anyways, and it really wouldn't be practical to build any closer anyways in the front of the property. Regarding findings recommended for this action, the committee may approve reduction of a road setback on an approved final plat or certified survey map to that specified in the applicable governing zoning ordinance, which I've referenced, if the following standards are met. And this would include setbacks in a recorded subdivision may only be changed by a correction instrument prepared by a Wisconsin registered land surveyor and recorded. And also, a setback reduction shall not be allowed in the unusual circumstance where a reduction of the setback will allow the lot or structure on the lot to be, unless it's in greater compliance with the objectives and standards of this ordinance. I would note that when the application was made, Hammond was under Chapter 17. They've since adopted Chapter 15. That issue really isn't applicable to this decision you're making this evening. And also, on this last point that indicates no recommendation had been received as of 8/10/2020 from the town of Hammond regarding the setback reduction waiver, the applicant has indicated to me that the town of Hammond considered this on August 10th, and they recommended approval. I haven't received any notification of that as of yet, but I'll just pass that on to you for your consideration. Regarding staff recommendation, we've included 4 recommended conditions, and I would note on this that staff recommends the following findings for committee's consideration. 1, the reduced structure setback will allow the lot or structures on the lot to be in greater compliance with the objectives and standards of Chapter 17. Again, the application was made when town of Hammond was under 17, so I think that's still applicable. Due to the extensive road frontage, existing drainage, swale, and reduced structure setback, it will not negatively impact the layout, design, continuity, or aesthetics of the neighborhood access location. And 3, I ask you to strike this third item. I think this was inadvertently included from a prior staff report. You'll note it's referencing a proposed dwelling, and this action relates to wanting the setback reduction for an accessory structure. So you can just ignore item number 3 and strike it from your action. And also, I'd note that the town of Hammond, we hadn't received notification, but it's our understanding that they have recommended this, so you might want to consider that in your action. And lastly, I would note that the action would require that a Wisconsin registered land surveyor record a correction instrument to reduce the setback as per section 13.10B1 of the Land Division Ordinance. And at that, staff is available for questions should you have any.
Do we have any questions for staff? We do not. Very good, Mike. Thanks very much.
Seemed pretty straightforward on this one.
Yep. Is there anybody here who would like to speak in favor or against this waiver? You just step up to the microphone And, oh, you have to sign in too. You have to
You can sign in over there, please.
sign your name in and then step up to the microphone and introduce yourself. That's the public part of public hearing. Right. Well, we're glad you're here.
All right.
So state your name and your address and then say your piece.
All right. Stephen Storr, 1783 96th Avenue in Hammond, Wisconsin, right across the street from Sue. I am in favor of this ordinance change. I would like to build a building myself eventually, on an accessory building. And I was looking at the fact I would like to put it a little bit further away from my current garage. And that's why I'm looking at this too.
Well, glad to hear it. I'd have to tell you, this isn't an ordinance change. We're just discussing a waiver. So just to make sure you understand that. But we appreciate the fact that you're in favor of it. So thanks for coming in. All right, anybody else who'd like to speak?
Is it appropriate for me?
Absolutely. Did you sign in? I did. Okay.
I am Sue Bork, or Susan, I think the application, my given name, 1782 96th Avenue, and of course I'm in favor of you approving my setback waiver.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for coming in. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Very good. Then we'll close the public hearing and begin our business items. And before we move on, item number 1, I'd like to add a business item number 0, because I forgot to have us approve the minutes, and we're going to go all the way back up to the top of the agenda, and we have to have an official motion on that and approve the minutes. So is there anybody objects to unanimous approval of the minutes from our July meeting? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Then, Julie, you note that? Here we go. Business item number 1, do we have a motion to approve the waiver to setback reduction for Bork in the town of Hammond?
So move.
And seconded by Scott Coner. Very good. All in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, any discussion? Oh, sorry, we're going to discuss.
I guess I can't, but about the town of Hammond, whether they absolutely are in favor of this. I mean, we don't really know. I'd really like to have their input, but whether that's pending on their approval.
Would you rather table it then?
No, I would recommend that we approve it pending their approval, that we get some letter from them that they, I don't know if that's possible. It's possible, I guess. We can do that. Maybe Alan's got an idea.
I do know our corp counsel is available, and I would suggest that we ask his opinion. I do not believe he would agree that it's appropriate for you to hold this up pending. They've had a lot of time. They made their decision, and they chose not to share it, and so I don't personally think we have limited their ability to give us their recommendation.
Well, okay, that's what I was going to ask, if they had ample time. If they've had ample time to respond, then I'm fine with it.
I don't know if our corp counsel would like to add anything.
Ellen, you said it very well. It's like I was speaking. Thank you.
I thought you were in the room, Scott. Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Moving on to item number 2, UW-Madison Extension staff presentation, Ryan Sterry, Agricultural Extension Educator. Ryan, are you here?
Over the internet airwaves, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time tonight. I know committee's changed a little bit since the last time I met with them. I think the purpose of a nice presentation is periodically, not every meeting obviously, but once in a while, Extension really encourages their staff to make connections with their governing committee, which you are. So I prepared a few slides tonight. If you have questions, please let me know. I know you got a long agenda, so I wanted to put things in here, but I also want to be respectful of your time as well. So with that, so UW Extension within the agriculture program has kind of created these general areas of topics and expertise. So livestock, dairy, farm management, crops and soils, horticulture. I'm not going to touch on horticulture tonight because my colleague Diana Alfuth specializes in that area, and she'll be meeting with you sometime later in the year. So within this, Extension's asked us to kind of develop our own niches, areas of expertise. So I focused a little bit more on the livestock and dairy side of the things. I was doing some farm management things previously that I'm still doing. So that was kind of my response to kind of creating my niche, being focused. No, that doesn't mean if you ask me a crops and soils question, I'm going to not answer it. Definitely still send those our way. It's just that we're trying to work a little bit more with our colleagues in neighboring areas as well. So my colleague in Dunn County really specializes in this farm management area. So there might be some farm management questions I send her way. She might have some beef questions that she sends my way, and we're trying to work more collaboratively in that respect. So here's some program titles. I just threw these in here just to give you an idea of what you might see in an agriculture extension program in the county. So Heart of the Farm and Andy's Project are two farm management programs that focus on women in agriculture. Cultivating Your Farm Future is a newer program that's a little bit more into the planning, kind of trying to prep some families for if you're thinking about starting a farm, transferring the farm within the family. Let's start thinking about what that process might look like. Within the livestock area, we do meetings, we do a fall beef, cow-calf field day. The cattle feeders is more for finishing, marketing the finished product of beef, and also there's getting to be more and more quality assurance certifications farmers might be asked for. So we provide those trainings, administer those exams. Some things that might be a little bit newer or different than what you've heard before. Something that's happening in dairy and beef industry is more crossing, trying to do a better job marketing calves. So that's something I've been asked to do a little bit more work on. Management skills. Worked with Yoga River Falls for the first time last fall on that, doing some training, soft skills training for their students would be a good example of that. And then these last bullet points really don't fit specifically into any of these, but if I was to list out some of the typical calls that come into the extension office, it's especially lately, how do we navigate, the Paycheck Protection Program apply to a farm or not? That's a really good question. Different types of things of pricing, whether it's, what do you think is land rent? I have to go rent a tractor. How would I figure out what appropriate rental rate is for those things? Those are real common, along with soil testing, and PAT stands for pesticide applicator training, which is something we provide the training and administer the exam for that. So the big question has been, what are we doing during this time of COVID-19? And COVID brain, I think, is something I've heard in the news the other day. And I had to step back and think. It's like, okay, what were we doing back in March and April? It's not that long ago, but it feels like forever ago. So I would say specific to Extension Ag programs, especially in this April timeframe, stretching some into May, we were hearing the things about, that's when the meat packing plants were having some issues having to close. So what are farmers going to do with animals that they're planning to sell? Dumping milk, those kinds of things was really, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that was early this spring, early this summer. That's really what we're in the midst of. Then I'll touch a little bit on future events and some future program planning, and then just a couple odds and ends to finish up on. So as I was saying, I jumped at a slide, but early April, we started dealing with questions on, marketing cattle, dumping milk, just like people are stocking up at the grocery store, farmers are stocking up feed, and then we're starting to wonder, okay, are we going to run short on feed? Some misconceptions about coronaviruses in terms of, transmission from animals to humans, kinds of things that we're getting. And then the thing that nobody likes to talk about, but you do have to talk about, and this is regardless of COVID, doing some contingency planning, doing some planning. If I had a car accident tomorrow, would my family know, I have this many beef cows, this is what they need to be fed, those kinds of things that people may not necessarily want to talk about, but we need to talk about, especially in times like this. So with, restrictions and health protocols, a lot of the things that we would normally want to do face-to-face, we've had to take a break from that. So in response, we've done more to update articles on our websites. This good old thing called direct mail. We still do that. I'm still capable of doing that. Webinars, and also we found that more of the industry farm publications, farm newspapers, were picking up on some of these things we're sending out on our websites, and also doing mailings. So this one down here, this coffee chat, that was a webinar we did. This ties into that Heart of the Farm program, where we did several sessions focused both on the farm finances as long as personal finances. And we tried to keep the group small so we could have that more informal, intimate conversation, and also tried to work in some icebreakers and just some things of, we can't connect in person, how can we connect online, and so we don't feel quite so isolated on the farm. I can skip ahead of this, but I just do this in their example. Again, those things that we may not want to talk about, but need to talk about. So one of the things we did was we created a template. This one happened to be for a dairy farm, but we have them for crop farms and other types of farm enterprises. Do you have a list somewhere of your key contacts? Who's your veterinarian? Who's your feed supplier? In case something were to happen to you, does your family, do your neighbors have those contacts so the farm can carry on? So if I went through this too fast, and I can send this out later, extension set up, extension response website related to our information on COVID-19. I'm highlighting just the agriculture section, but there's other sections as well for personal finance, personal health as well. But most of these articles are listed there, so I can send out that web link if you want to take a closer look at some of the different topics we were covering at that time. I just want to touch real briefly on events. So I was meeting with one of my supervisors earlier today, and I was like, this is the time of year I'm thinking about setting up a Farm City Day and doing more of the field day kind of things. It's growing season. People don't want to sit in the classroom right now. I can see out my window right now, the beautiful sun is out there. And so I definitely sympathize with people that they don't necessarily want another Zoom right now. So the reason I put this in here, though, I really wanted to emphasize not into why decisions were made, but I just want people to know there was a lot of thought, a lot of consideration given to alternatives. Could there be some virtual judging at the fair, for the example? Could we have done something hybrid with Farm City Day, where it's more of a drive-through event? I don't think anybody threw their hands up and said, oh, we get a year off this year, count me out. There's good arguments both ways to take that approach, not to take that approach. If you have questions, that's something you can talk about later. But I just want to emphasize the volunteers for those programs, they put a lot of thought into this before those decisions were made and how those decisions were going to be communicated. So looking ahead, especially more for agriculture, harvest is a very busy time, and we're getting close to that now. I don't want to talk about it. Summer's over, fall's coming, but summer's almost over and fall's coming. So really that January, February, March timeline was when we did more of the in-person sit-down types of trainings and classes for egg programming. So we don't have all this plotted out yet, but we're getting there. So look for more webinars from us, look for more print articles, YouTube videos, things on our websites. Websites are going to be updated and redesigned. In-person programming, I don't know what's going to happen between now and January, but one of the things we're really talking about, you might see more hybrid programming where there's prep material, either watch a video or in print, sent out ahead of time, so that if we do have to meet in person for something hands-on or for taking an exam, we're not taking all day for it. We can really limit those times and limit people's exposure, excuse me. So if you're looking for more specifics on what that might look like, since we can't do our face-to-face cow-calf field day on the farm this year, we're going to do a newsletter instead. One of the things we're looking at doing this winter is planning for emergency livestock transport response in case somebody has an accident with a cattle trailer. That's what that's really getting at. And that's where we probably do that hybrid. Instead of sitting down for an 8-hour training, we're going to send a lot of materials out ahead of time. But there's things like inspecting a cattle trailer, first responder has to say, use the jaws of life, trailer tipped on its side, we have to cut it open. We really want to get those responders in a trailer ahead of time, take a look, these are the areas that are better for cutting, these areas that, for structural integrity, you don't want to touch those. That's better done hands-on, but doing that in a way that we're really limiting the time that we have to do that face-to-face. So we do things for sheep and goats, we do egg lenders conference, we're already planning those things and whatnot. A couple grants that we're working on, and just, this is new, but something we're always updating is resource guides. One of the questions I'm getting more this time of year is I have X number of round bales and I have X number of cows, do I have enough hay to get through the winter? Legitimate question if you're a farmer. So we do develop resource guides of how to figure that out now so you don't get into March and find out you ran out of hay. This is the footnotes I was mentioning. We did have flooding incident in late June. I think this speaks to what kind of year 2020 has been. In other years, that might have been our major event, and not to downplay that it wasn't a major event, but it's just another one to add to the list of 2020. But we did send out information as quickly as we could afterwards in case you had a garden that was flooded. Is that produce safe to eat or not? That would be a common question that comes after a flooding event. How do you think about if my cornfield flooded, is my corn going to survive or not? So we did try to do some rapid response to get some of that information out there relatively as soon as we could after that event. And then I'm not going to present this tonight. I just want to let you know there is a new ag impact report. These are updated periodically every 5-6 years, along with the Census of Agriculture. It's done every 5-6 years. More infographics that go around, less text. If you want to get this, I can send it to you. Again, there's a web link there. Just want to let you know that that is out there. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Do we have any questions for Ryan?
I don't really have a question, but that was quick and informative. And actually, I do have a question. Have you been busier with the changes, or has it been the same level of busyness but different?
I would say heavy on the different. So steep learning curves for all of us, but depending on your tech savvy of transitioning things that you're used to doing in person to online, some of those transitions are easier than others. Doing more of developing our own YouTube type videos. I'm not gonna lie, the first ones, I look at them like I have to redo this one, but you got to do it a couple times to get some practice and start getting better at it. So you got to start somewhere, but that's one of the things we learned. One thing I forgot to mention, earlier in the year, that April, May, early June time frame, there's more things we're talking about, especially Heather and Eileen, you'll hear from them later, that work with the 4-H program, of things that we wanted to do maybe more on the youth side. The thing that we didn't realize at the time, we also had virtual school learning going on at that time as well. And so we had some ideas. We're getting excited. We'd roll that out there, pitch the idea out there, and parents would say, my kids have been virtual schooling all day long. Please don't make me do another 4-H meeting again on Zoom. The kids need to get away from the screen. We need to lock them outside the house for a few minutes and have them run around the block to burn some energy off. So I think we had some good intentions there, and not to say that we won't do some of that going into this fall, but maybe being a little more conscientious of that.
Does anybody else have a question for Ryan? That was really good, Ryan. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Yes, you too. We'll see each other face to face again here shortly.
Next year at the fair, at least. So
that's right.
Now we'll move on to our financial report and turn it over to our acting administrator, Ken Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will get to a financial report here shortly. Here we go. I was going to point out Register of Deeds, sort of give a shout out to them. Their revenues coming in for fees have been very strong. They typically exceed their budget, and they will again this year. So very strong revenue there, a little bit bigger. So if you look at where we should be seeing about 42% of the budget remaining, and they're down to 19% that they need to collect to hit their budget target with almost half the year left. So Register of Deed fees, very, very strong. Recycling. On the let's see, I passed it already. The hazardous waste, point out the blank expenses there. The collection wasn't able to happen this spring like it was supposed to. So if you see the blank numbers there, there's a reason. In the Parks Department, they also have very strong revenues. So they have a third of their revenues to collect yet for park fees and rents. So they're ahead of schedule also. And then when you look at all of the departmental expenses, they're doing very well. They have more than the 42% average where we would be at right now, which means that they have underspent for their total expenses if you look at it at a year-to-date basis. Do you have any questions on the financial reports other than those items I've pointed out?
I think it looks good. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the Eckerd Blufflands Master Planning Process Update, Mr. John Hilgers.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. Just want to take a few moments on the agenda tonight to give you an update on the Eckerd Bluffland Park Master Planning process. Earlier this year, we entered into a contract with the Hoisington Kogler Group. They are a park planning firm who will be assisting us in this update process. Our intent was originally to begin in March, but I think we had signed the agreement, and a week later we were sent home because of COVID-19. So now that we're back and running, we really hit this hard beginning in July. And just to walk through a few numbers with you, starting in July, to get the discussion started, we took this flyer that we created that talks a little about what's going to be happening with the plan. You know, we're going to be looking at the 170 acres of property that the county has acquired over the last few years in the Riverway District. And we established some links. We have a social pinpoint page that we reference, as well as a Survey Monkey. And then to get the discussion started, we attached a map that we sent out along with the notices. And so what we did is we took everybody within a 3/4 mile radius. We took 600 property owners and we mailed that flyer to them to get them engaged in the process. We also established a Facebook page that was meant to engage residents. And as of earlier this week, we had about 39,500 hits on the Facebook page, which is really good. And of that number, we had about 8,000 that took it one step further and actually engaged by clicking on and reviewing more information within the Facebook page. We also engaged our newspapers. We put a publication out with the same information where people could go to and access the site. We also established a specific web page on our county website. We've also begun to have what we call smaller stakeholder meetings or conversations. So for example, we've been meeting with our electric utilities on what it would take to get electric utility service into the park if and when developed. We also have a meeting set up with DOT and the Highway Commissioner to talk about access into the park. What are the opportunities? What are the limitations? Again, so we can collect this information and kind of ramp up to at least getting some concepts put together over the next couple months. And then we sent a notice out to every governmental jurisdiction in the county, every city, village, and township to offer them input into the process. And then, of course, we contacted our county board members. Looking forward, as we continue to move on in the process, we take a look at our next steps. And what we're doing is through Labor Day, we're going to be taking public comment based on the flyer that went out. Again, people are leaving comments for us on our webpage, which is good. We're going to be doing that through a Labor Day. After that, we're going to be spending a good part of September and October taking all the information we're gathering from public comments, our stakeholder meetings, and preparing a number of different plan concepts. And that would be August through October. And I think we'd be checking back in with you in October, November to kind of review the concepts that we've come up with. Once we refine those concepts, maybe take the better points of all the different concepts, we'd like to hone in on developing a master plan kind of around the holidays, early next year. And then the anticipation would be that we would have a public hearing with the Community Development Committee sometime in February or maybe March of next year. We still have a lot of work to do in gaining public comment. And maybe if I can just review a few numbers with you. Based on the information that people have been leaving us, we've had about 600 comments left through SurveyMonkey and comments online. About 90% of the respondents thus far favor the park having some kind of hiking trail activities. 82% favor interest in scenic vistas. In other words, opening up panoramas to the Riverway area. And 72% of respondents indicated interest in picnic facilities. So that's kind of what we're hearing thus far. And then we also leave the option for people to leave their email address so we can give them updates as the project moves on. We have about 350 people that have signed up to receive future email updates. So I think the project is off to a good start. We've hit it hard getting the word out. We have a lot of interested people going onto the website, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Just to kind of give you an overview. So I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you might have.
Judy.
I have three, believe it or not. One is if you go up to page 49 in the packet, that has the, that's like the second page, then, yep, right there. It just seems like you're doing another road parallel to the one that's already there. I realize it's lower, but why are you doing, I can see the one that goes, I'm going to say, east-west, but that one that goes north-south is parallel to what's already there. Is that necessary?
Yeah, so when we've been looking at the alignment of the Highway Old 35, which is right here, yeah. It's a gravel road. Some of the stakeholder meetings we've had have involved the abutting property owners. We want to make sure we got into discussions with them. And there's concern about the wear and tear and the impact that the park would have on Old Highway 35 from the residents that live here. But more importantly, you know, if we were going to use Old 35 as a primary park access, if you look at the two angles where Old 35 hooks up to the new 35, they are not very good sight distance angles. And some of the preliminary comments that we've looked at from past developments that have been proposed in this area, the DOT favors an access point where this yellow line is indicated that tees up to new 35. It provides better sight distance. And quite honestly, from a park perspective, it's good to have one centralized, focused entrance point. So as of right now, that's kind of the direction that we're getting based on feedback and some of the research we've done thus far.
Two more questions?
Yeah, if that's okay, unless.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's, what? Microphone. Okay. The second one is, there, I assume the white areas, there's houses there.
Yes.
I am leery of, I can see maybe archery, bow and arrow hunting, but rifle hunting is scary.
Yes, and we did, one of the two meetings we had with the abutting property owners, we certainly heard those concerns. They were concerned about the rifle hunting. There seemed to be some openness to the bow hunting. There were definitely concerns about trapping from some of the residents, more so based on when the park is ultimately developed and we have hiking trails and walking trails and picnic areas. But as part of this park planning process, we do have to be sensitive because some of the grant money we did receive from the DNR, we do need to acknowledge some ability for some form of hunting. So we're going to be going through that review process as part of this larger master plan process. But yes, those concerns were definitely raised.
So depending on what kind of grants you get, we have no option, but we have to allow some hunting and trapping in there. Can we limit it? Or is it going to be?
I think Ellen might have to chime in. I was not here when those grants were obtained, so.
This is a complicated situation, and I would suggest we save it till we get further along in the process. But there are some options, but there are some things that we cannot touch.
Okay. My last
we will
one,
explore all options we can, and we are getting a lot of public comment that will help this committee make some decisions. So. Okay. And my last comment, I think, is this the one where you have a lot of disc golf that they want in?
Yeah, there seem to have been a lot of initial comments regarding disc golf, and I think, I don't know if the initial commenter spread word to some of the different groups out there, but we did receive a highly proportionate amount of disc golf comments. Through our research, I think we've learned that over at Willow River State Park, there was once a disc golf course in that location, but it was discontinued because it wasn't used. So I think we really need to study and evaluate whether or not that's a reasonable use at this location, especially given the topography and the limited open sites that we do have. I think we're really going to have to look at that pretty hard. So the other thing I do want to point out, you know, we also invited our partners, the St. Croix River Association, the DNR, the Sportsmen's Alliance. We have a bird watching club in the county that I did not know about. The Prairie Restoration Habitat, we all reached out to them to make sure they had the opportunity to join us in some of our informal discussions. So I think at this point we feel pretty good about the outreach we've done, but there's still a lot of work to do, and we will continue to update you as we move along. Any other questions?
Scott?
You know, with the new road that you have coming in there to try to defer from using the old 35 corridor on the yellow trail, but then it does connect back up with the access road that goes back to the cabins, and I was noticing the park development down to the, if I have the directions north and south, the ones down to the southwest corridor down there. Is the road section that is between those, how is that going to be? Is that going to end up being a park road, or is that going to end up being a town road? Or
are you talking River Heights Trail, this section right through here?
Correct.
Yes, that is currently being reviewed. We still need to do some research on that, but you know, we'll have to provide access. We'll continue to have to be able to provide access to the existing landowner and then the Gary Zappa residence, which is kind of just outside the park on the south boundary. So we will be evaluating that as part of this process. But the easement that you're talking about, that River Heights Trail lies upon, is on county-owned property. So whether or not we end up maybe maintaining that through the future process, those are still issues we need to research and clarify. And we will certainly address that as part of the master planning process. Yes, it's currently a paved road. I believe it's a 12 or 14 foot wide driveway at this point to serve the residents. It also serves these 4 residents right up in this area adjacent to the St. Croix River.
So that would have to be built to like a minimum of a town spec road eventually if you're going to use it for park use?
We need to review that. I don't want to say yes or no either way, but we're certainly going to look at that.
We would build it to the specifications, which are similar to town road, but not town road because it'd be on private property. County's property is still, it's used by the public, but it's still county owned, not publicly owned in that sense.
Then would there be a shared cost between the town and the county, or is that going to be picked up entirely by the county?
It would not be a public town road.
Okay.
So I believe it would, internal to the park would be our cost.
Okay. Are the people that are currently there paying for any maintenance, or is that?
There's a maintenance agreement they have that they've honored for many, many years, ever since they built their homes.
Okay. Just be curious for the future.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if I can talk about that, there's currently a roadway maintenance agreement, so that would either need to be reworked, or it's possible that the county could have another way to access that lower portion of the park by extending the roadway in the yellow dotted and then down. Yes, go west, John, somewhere like that, and then down. That's all to be, I guess, negotiated and researched. We'll want to have the least amount of impact for the residents that are currently there.
Correct.
All right, any other questions or comments, conversation? It's wonderful work. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ellen. Great teamwork. All right, let's move on to our next agenda item, which, John, stay right there. Zoning Chapter 15 update.
Whoa. And again, this is more of a heads up for the committee. As you recall, and maybe for the benefit of the new members on the committee, November 2019, the county board adopted the Chapter 15 revised zoning code and the zoning map. As part of the approval process, the county board also allowed a 180-day grace period in which towns and property owners who may not have been fully engaged in the process would have a little bit more time to review the zoning map and make any changes that they felt were necessary. So at the direction of the county board, staff established a process in order to work with the towns and the property owners on that process. And what we did is we proposed and we adopted a zoning change form that residents could fill out and bring to their town boards. The initial 180-day period was going to expire on May 4th of this year, but due to COVID, it was extended to Friday, July 24th, just recently. So we closed that, and as of the July 24th deadline, we had 51 property owners that took advantage of this process. So what we're going to be doing, and my reason for being here, is to let you know that we are going to have a public hearing to review those changes and potentially change the zoning map at next month's meeting. So that'll be one of the future agenda items that you will have. One of the caveats that we built into this process, though, was before the county would accept any of the zoning change forms, it had to be consistent with the town comp plan, and it had to be recommended for approval by the respective town boards. So what we're going to be bringing you next month are going to be changes that have been ratified by the respective town boards and are consistent with the comp plans. So just so you know, we're not going to be preparing any lengthy reports about change of zoning. We're going to be providing individual maps of the town showing the changes and a little brief summary on what we've done to this point. So again, it's kind of a way to work with the towns, give them a little bit more opportunity, a little bit more time to get the zoning where they want it, especially in light, we reviewed about 22,000 parcels as part of the zoning update process. It took us 2 years working with the towns and the property owners. We want to make sure we get it right. So this will be the last step in the process of the comprehensive revision. So just a FYI, more of a heads up that this will be coming as a hearing to you next month, September. And then the other thing I'd like to quickly point out, if I could, as part of the adoption process, towns had 1 year from last November to opt in to county zoning. If they didn't opt in, they would be without zoning. And so what we did is we prepared a map for you to show you what towns have opted in and the dates that they have opted in. And we have a copy of this map in your packet. And as you can see, pretty much across the county, everybody's pretty much opted in. Where we do have the comments where it's town approved but filing not complete, both of those towns completed their process, so they are officially in. Hammond came in, I believe it was today, and O'Galley came in on Tuesday. So the 2 towns remaining are Pleasant Valley and the town of St. Joseph. We have had some communication with Pleasant Valley. We do anticipate them opting into county zoning. I do understand that the town of St. Joseph will have a public hearing on September 14th to consider their own zoning ordinance, which is fine. This is part of the process, and our comprehensive revision would allow them the opportunity to at least consider opting out. And then the remaining 3 towns, the town of Troy, Hudson, and then the town of Forest way up in the northeast corner of the county. They were under their own zoning before we started our comp revision, and they are going to stay with their own zoning after the comprehensive revision. So by and large, we're getting to the end of the process. Again, started in 2017. Hopefully by November we'll know who's in, who's out. But that's kind of the status of where we're at right now. And again, for this, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have questions? We'll be waiting until next month and looking forward to hearing your progress.
Yep, thank you very much. And we'll make sure your agenda packet is thorough and complete and is clear in what action you're needing to take.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Very good. Now we're looking forward to hearing the groundwater quality update. Mr. Webster.
Whoops. I'm trying to center it for you.
Yeah, massive page in there.
There.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, can you guys hear me fine with the mask on? All right, so for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Cole Webster. I'm the Water Resources and Outreach Specialist, and I started with the county in December of 2019. Recognize many of the faces, but I'm glad to be here and giving an update on some of the groundwater work that we've been doing in the last couple months. So I'll just go over this real quickly. I'm not going to read through all of these priorities, but I just wanted to note that all of the activities that we've been doing in the groundwater realm have all been pertaining to these recommended priorities from the groundwater study group. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this document. If you want to review it, we do have it on our external facing page. You can find it there, and it expands on every single one of these priorities. But everything that I'll be talking about today is really just trying to get at completing these various priorities. So quick overview of the projects we've been working on. The Citizen Groundwater Monitoring Program, that's a 5-year study. The nitrate source analysis testing, I know that one was placed somewhat highly on the priority list. Free nitrate screening clinics. We've recently started some sinkhole mapping. We've been advancing the manure and brownwater spill response plan. I've personally been working quite a bit on the groundwater modeling issue, and then we've also done a significant amount of effort in our well database reorganization. I'll dive into each one of those and just give a little bit of background. So, many of you are probably familiar with this program, the Citizen Groundwater Monitoring Program. This is really, the goal of this project is to get a better baseline understanding of nitrate contamination throughout St. Croix County and how that might be changing moving forward. So it's a 5-year study that began in 2019. That was the first year of the sampling for it. We're somewhat close to doing the second year of sampling, which will happen in end of September, early October. The first year of sampling included 178 wells, so we had pretty good turnout. A lot of people signed up for it, which was good to see. Certainly a lot of interest in this subject throughout the county. We used a grid system just to get better spatial representation of the county. One of the main things that I was working on when I first started was tracking down all of the well construction data and performing preliminary analysis of the first year data that we got back in January from University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. So for those first 178 wells, we have data from year one on a pretty broad variety of different parameters, and we have a lot of that background work done for gathering that well construction data, which will be extremely helpful to already have that moving forward. And we've also been working on, we just recently, I think a couple weeks ago, we put out a Citizen Groundwater Monitoring Program story map, which is actually what this photo here is from. I worked with our GIS team to produce this, and so it's basically a series of, it's almost like an interactive PowerPoint that goes through some of the background of the project itself, and then it talks about regional geology and kind of why conditions are the way that they are. Gives some background to that, and then it also gives background to the specific project, and it dives into just some of the preliminary analysis that's been done for that first year data. We have this posted on the external facing website. It has also been included in a handful of Facebook posts through our recycling Facebook page, just as an outreach effort. And then it was also sent directly to the participants just as a way to update them on the data. So like I said, the second year of sampling, all the logistics are set in place for that to occur end of September, first week of October, and then deliver those samples that we get on October 12th to Stevens Point. So we're currently in the process of trying to add more private wells to our grid system to try to get a little bit better representation spatially for years 2 through 5 of the program. This map is actually what's that showing. This is actually from the story map I mentioned in the last slide. The orange grids participated in year 1, and then the purple grids are additions for year 2 through 5, and then the gray grids are still vacant. We're still hoping to fill in a handful more just through some Facebook outreach pushes in the next couple weeks before we do the sampling. So so we've, in the past couple months since we got our data back from year 1, we've been able to add 13 more additional wells for years 2 through 5, totaling 191 participants for the upcoming years. And that was really completed through outreach at some of our free nitrate screening clinics, as well as some of the Facebook pushes that included information about the project, got the word out, and was able to get some responses of people who were interested and were actually in some of the available grids. So, on to nitrate source analysis. This is, it's kind of a partner type study to the 5-year study that looks to broadly classify nitrate sources across the county by detecting the presence of common human, agricultural, and bovine indicators alongside elevated nitrate concentrations. We actually began the testing for this, collecting the samples in December, right when I started. And we collected 14 samples initially from transient non-community wells as well as town hall wells. One of the difficulties right away was that you kind of have to have there's a criteria that need to be met for those wells to be considered for this type of testing. And so it required a little bit more time combing through some of the data we have from our well database, and then do the outreach to try to gain more samples for this type of analysis. So the past few months, that's what we've been working on. And the second round of sampling occurred, I have occurring here because I wrote this before I did it, but it occurred August 3rd through August 12th, and we were able to get 39 more samples and bring those to the lab. So that was fantastic. It was about right what we were hoping to get. Once we get the results back from Stevens Point, we'll start working on the analysis for that. And so the estimated completion time for this analysis is fall 2020, likely later fall, potentially November would be my guess. Another item that we've been working on is free drinking water nitrate screening clinics. Really the purpose of these clinics is to provide private drinking water well owners with the opportunity to screen their drinking water for nitrate free of charge. And we're able to do this as we have some field sampling equipment, specifically a field sampling probe that has a nitrate attachment. And we have the standards for it so that we can calibrate it each time we hold these events and ensure it's as accurate as possible. And on top of that, it benefits everyone as we're able to get face-to-face with people and talk about groundwater quality and drinking water quality. And it tends to be a jumping off point, so we get to discuss some of the other projects that we're doing at the county level and other testing to recommend, just depending on the screening results at these events. They've been pretty popular. This is a photo from the March event. So this was actually about 6 days before everything with COVID unfolded. You'll notice that we're not wearing masks because that was in the good old days. And I believe at that event we had 123 samples that were analyzed. So that was a great event, and this topic continues on to the next page, and you'll notice the change in the room there. We're wearing masks for that one. So to summarize what we've done with these events this year, we've had 3 of them so far. There's a potential we might be able to squeeze one more in, but the first one was at the Baldwin Agricultural Center. We had 127 participants. The second was at the Croix Town Hall, and that was in June. We had 99 participants. And then the last one was in mid-July, and that was at St. Joseph Town Hall, and there were 93 participants at that one. So all said and done, we were able to analyze 319 samples free of charge to St. Croix County residents. And the reason that these are spread out at different locations is we're trying to kind of bounce them around at different town halls to just for the ease of access for citizens throughout the county. So we plan to, moving forward throughout the years, just continue to bounce them around at various locations to give people an ample opportunity to participate in this type of event. Like I said, there's potential to schedule one more clinic for 2020. We haven't fully landed on that and where it would be if it does happen. And these clinics have really shown that our citizens are really interested in their drinking water quality, and we've had a lot of great engaging discussions with them at these events. And this photo is from the most recent event at St. Joseph Town Hall. So we've utilized the plastic partitions and really put in the work to make sure that they're COVID safe. The next project, so this spring we received a remote sensing data set of potential sinkhole locations from a contractor. And in the past few months, 2 or 3 months, we've been going through the process of setting up a way to field verify these locations and then actually carry that out. So, we get this data set from the contractor, and basically it says these are potential sites, and what we want to do is actually go out and say, is this a sinkhole or is it not, and how accurate is this data set? Give us a better understanding of where these sinkholes are, the severity of them, and really, these are conduits to the groundwater table, and so it's important to know where they are and how many we have. We've worked with the GIS department quite a bit to create a field editing app using the ArcGIS Collector app. And that's been extremely helpful to go out in the field, take photos, collect all of the information, and log it directly into our database that we're using to collect these. It does rely on cell service, so sometimes you have to write it and then enter all that stuff in when you have cell service.
I'm just going to ask, is there a limit to the size of the sinkhole that it can identify?
For the remote sensing data?
Yeah.
I don't know if there were specific limits. The contractor was the person who basically put in all of the work, and what they did was, long story short, I don't know the logistics behind it, but they took all of this spatial data, topography, hydrological data, aerial imagery, and they put it into a code that actually ran through grid, image by image, and looked at all of that, put it into that code, and actually identified this might be a sinkhole. Some of the ones that we've visited have been somewhat small, but I don't know if there's a specific threshold for how small they would be, or large for that matter. That would be I could reach out to the contractor and see if he might know, but offhand I'm not sure.
It would greatly depend, Judy, on the aerial photography. And over most of St. Croix County, the aerial photography is very uniform, but there are areas where it's not as uniform, so that would be the main limitation. The contractor was hired by us, St. Croix, and Brett and the team set up the parameters for what they wanted done, and working with the contractor, of course, but we hired that data that was produced was we paid for it. It was one of the very last things we did with the mitigation funding.
Yeah, I just, like sinkholes can range drastically in size, and that's just why I was wondering if, we're missing a lot, or...
I don't think this will have missed a lot. Obviously, it could miss some. Again, it goes back, but...
Well, I totally see it missing some.
You can't guarantee 100%, but the whole intent was to capture a lot of the ones that people don't even realize are out there.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't get 100% because Mrs. Drath just had a new one at her...
Yeah. Yeah, I think Brett was about to hop on and say something. Did you want to say something, Brett?
Yeah, hello. It would have to be at least greater than a meter. A digital elevation model has the grid size of 1 meter. So the depressions or the sinkholes would have to be at least greater than that.
Brett, we lost most of what you said.
Okay.
We heard the beginning and the end and nothing in between.
All right. The digital elevation model data had a grid size of 1 meter, so the depression or sinkhole would have to be greater than 1 square meter.
You mean a cubic meter, Brett?
Surface meter, 1 meter by 1 meter.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Wow.
I'd like to clarify one question too,
Sure.
as long as we've paused. We say the contractor, I'm noticing it's Joseph Ayers, who's a real reputable engineering company, and just to make sure that's who we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
that's not who it is. Joseph
not-
Ayers is our employee.
I see, oh, never mind.
He's our employee. It's not Ayers and Associates, it's Joseph Ayers, our employee, who created all these.
Oh, Joe.
Joe
Yeah, I know
can create
Joe.
applications. He's a very, very talented young man.
Yeah.
I thought it was Ayers Associates.
No.
Okay, what contractor do we use?
I'd have to have Brett.
Never mind.
Joseph Ayers.
Excuse me.
So yeah, but basically kind of getting at your question, Judy, is that what we're doing now is going out and verifying how many of these are sinkholes and how many of them might have been mislabeled or misidentified. So we began that process in June, and since then we visited 48, although we did just recently visit Virginia Drath's site, so it'd actually bring that up to 49. And like you said, that wasn't identified on one, so we got another one on there that wasn't identified. And this is basically just some of the interface from that application that was created by our GIS department. So really helpful to use. Moving on, so we had really put in, oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Just had a question. How far out are you till you have this map so that it may become accessible to look at?
As in public facing, external?
Correct.
That I'm not totally sure about. I think there were about 500 points identified, and so in terms of actually working our way through that, it would take a while.
Sure.
And I guess I'm, personally unsure of the territory of, publishing this type of data, because there are points that are on people's private property, so we certainly need to discuss that.
Will you be taking the data information collected here and also comparing it to like changes in well depths and things like that?
Yeah, we're certainly looking at these in regards to proximity to wells and what that might mean for connectivity between, surface contaminants and nearby wells. That's really one of the main goals to get out of this, is to use the data from the sinkholes moving forward in regards to wells and well maintenance and safety.
Thank you.
So Scott, as a new member of the committee, you might not be aware that when Cole mentioned the groundwater study group and those priorities, a great deal of the priority and a great deal of the work they're doing is to try to develop scientific data that identifies sensitivities, like very serious sensitivities, like what Ginny mentioned earlier about not just karst topography, but also very specific things like sinkholes and stuff. Because if you don't have a scientific layer of data, you cannot, in this state right now under current law, be more conservative than state law or have a different ordinance than state law with regard to siting of animal waste storage or operation of animal waste. So that is a big part of the goal of this project. If that helps make a sense of why there's so much very high-level scientific analysis going on. Yeah.
Right, it was the result of that ground and surface water study group in 2017, and that was the purpose of the group, is to decide what needs to be done. And what we learned was that we don't have the scientific evidence to know where the pollution's coming from. We can never, with any definition, decide what, or know. We could, there's stuff in the ground, and we can't, with scientific facts, say it's coming from there. So we need to have this body of data. So please continue.
Sure, thank you. Moving on, we had, right around the time that I started, we made some significant headway on the manure and brown water spill response plan. I know that I attended one of these meetings in January, and this was brought up and was discussed then. We are nearing the first final draft. We're kind of basically at the stage of bringing it for final review within our internal working group. One thing to note about this plan too is that it kind of stalled out specifically due to COVID-19 temporarily because we were waiting for some public health input for specific outreach messaging. And as COVID-19 hit, we're full force responding to that. And so we've actually recently gotten their input and have been able to revamp this project. And Tim and I both have spent quite a bit of time the past 2 weeks working on this. So with the additions from public health, we're pretty close to being at the stage for getting this pushed out to a more formal review process. In terms of groundwater modeling, so I've put quite a bit of effort into, one, learning this specific program, ModFlow, and then really one of the main projects has been trying to recover and utilize some of the models that were created by the USGS in 2009 for a publication that came out. They actually built a regional tri-county model and then a smaller model that focused on Twin Lakes. I was able to recover the regional model and have that run successfully. And then on top of that, I've been working on building up a Twin Lakes model and trying to make it a little bit better just in regards to tweaking some of the parameters to make them a bit more accurate rather than have them at that regional scale from the publication in 2009. Basically, I'm in the process of continuing to learn the program. It's a complex program, and continue to add data to it to make it more site-specific and more representative of the hydrological system in the area, and be able to quickly recreate these models for other areas. I had mentioned in the beginning that we had done quite a bit of well database reorganization. So our old St. Croix County GIS well database basically consisted of two separate data sets. So one was basically a direct upload from the Wisconsin DNR, and the other one was built up internally from projects, research projects and outreach projects that we had done, throughout the past few decades. So we've kind of had these two separate data sets that, depending on who you were working with, you had to go to one or the other, which sometimes made it difficult or confusing. And then we also saw the need to reorganize these just in general to make them a lot better for the everyday use when we're talking to citizens about, they have questions about their well, so being able to look them up quicker, have it match our internal addressing system rather than the DNR's way of addressing. So I've been working with the GIS staff to basically merge these two data sets, and then also set up a system with the DNR to have this continually be updated biannually, so twice a year get a data upload of all of the new wells that have been constructed. This, fortunately, was actually a phenomenal project to work on the first 2 months of when COVID really first blew up, as it was just a lot of heavy-duty grinding work, and me and one of the other GIS workers had time, and we got through the majority of it. So we're actually at the very end of this project, kind of at the last steps. So we've already used it quite a bit, and it's really helpful to have them reorganized. So that's just a final picture of what it looks like. But basically, we went from having two separate data sets to one that has, as of now, 12,984 well points. We reorganized just the attribute tables so that they're easier to use, easier to find data, cleaned up the addresses and the attributes with those, and then coordinated with the DNR to keep this up to date and make sure it doesn't get stagnant. And that is all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, back to the water testing. I think you had originally planned one for Somerset, and I was wondering if you're still thinking about doing that one.
Yeah, that one was set to happen early May, and that's, if we were to reschedule one, I think that would be our first choice. Really, it's balancing the calendar and see if we have time. Very much still in consideration. Yep.
That's an incredible report. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to break the rules a little bit. Ginny or anybody else in the audience have a question, because we've had a lot of questions. Shar? No? Okay, good. We'll move on. Discussion of possible resolution regarding the KFO moratorium. And Tim Stever's going to lead this one.
I don't know what the handouts are that you received for sure. Just the Bayfield one? Okay. I kind of thought that. I did remember looking through it a couple days ago. What I did was I don't really have a position one way or the other on it. And when Ellen said, this is resolution is kind of coming before the committee, take a look at it with respect to St. Croix County. What does this mean or implications? And so as I looked through the Bayfield County resolution, I noted a few things. One was that they kind of painted a picture of a large expansion, and that has definitely happened statewide. There's been almost a doubling, more than a doubling of the number of CAFOs statewide. In St. Croix County in 2005, we had 4 CAFOs, and now in 2020, over 15 years, we have 6. A few of those did expand, though. The animal numbers that are on those or contained within the county has remained similar over the years. There has been a tendency towards larger operations. That amount of growth that we've had equates to about a 2.2% growth rate over 15 years. There's a statement regarded in the resolution that kind of relates to the DADCAP review of the rules that are supposed to occur, and they state that they were reviewed 2010, 14, and 16 with no changes. In addition to that, it's not mentioned, was a particularly frustrating effort that was led in 2019 by DADCAP to elicit public response about livestock sighting rules, which this kind of addresses. This moratorium is trying to address livestock sighting and expansions in the state. Meetings were held all around the state, and there was a lot of public input. Now, there were a lot of people that went. That entire effort was shut down, and no changes were made. And I think this resolution that you're looking at from Bayfield County is partly out of the frustration of that effort. They thought there was going to be some changes, but none ever happened. Also related to those rules, the citing ATCP 51 is the rules related to livestock facility siting. It only governs the siting. The operation of the existing facilities within the rules that are in place now for the past 20 or 30 years has kind of produced some of the problems that are seen today. So one flaw, if there is one, related to the resolution is that it addresses siting and whether we should have large CAFOs in the state, but the operation of the facilities that we do have, as well as the operation of smaller facilities, has produced a lot of the problems that we have today, and that isn't really addressed by this per se. It does leave some windows open to do some work on those rules. Some of the comments on the WPDES permits. All CAFOs have to have a operation permit to address water. In St. Croix County, we have 6 CAFOs. 3 have existing permits that are current, and 3 have what we would call expired permits. I called the DNR and talked to them about this. If you have a past WPDES permit that is on the books, it's still in force until it's replaced by a new one. What it does happen, if you want to expand more than 20%, you have to have a new WPDES permit. You cannot expand until that is issued. It is widely known that DNR has not been able to keep up with the permits and the review of them, and the income from the permits is very scant and does not even come close to covering the cost of the review. So that is an existing problem that's widely known. Some of the comments in the resolution from Bayfield are about the size of farms. The loss of small farms is kind of a national problem. You know, it's a national occurrence. There are pockets where small farms are very viable, but generally those are where kind of related to urban populations that demand, you know, local agriculture and such. And across the whole landscape of the U.S., farm numbers are continuing to decrease over time. So don't know if we can affect that particular aspect, even though it does kind of touch your heart when you read that part of the resolution. A comment on the siting and operation of large industrial agricultural operations, it's trying to relate that with the losses of nutrients and bacteria. And the existing rules that we have are by and large followed for most farms. We do have problems with some that have continuing problems on an ongoing basis. However, the larger farms, it kind of states that the larger farms are going to lose more nutrients than the small farms who are using the same practices, but it's just a matter of acreage. So if you had a large farm and broke it up into 4 pieces, it's very possible that you'd have the same amount of losses from 4 farms versus the one large one. Altogether, agriculture in Wisconsin is responsible for 90% of the nitrate in drinking water, and it's pretty much an accepted number for where that nitrate came from. And also widespread elevated phosphorus losses in the surface waters of our state, which are very important for everyone. In St. Croix County, about 11% of the private wells are above the nitrate standard, and about 3/4 of the county area, surface area, has elevated phosphorus levels in surface water and is under a TMDL, which is a total maximum daily load for phosphorus, meaning that it's been elevated to the point where if you want to get a permit in those areas for a water treatment plant, for example, you have to be very cautious to not release phosphorus in those areas. Some of the identified problems come from CAFOs, for sure, and some from non-CAFO size operations and some from crop farming. For example, we have 6 CAFOs in the county with about 10,400 animal units. At the same time, we have about non-CAFO sized operations have 39,600 animal units. So there's about 20% of our animal units in our county are on those CAFO size operations, and almost 80% are on the non-CAFO size. So that's one part about the resolution that is open to question, is that I looked quite heavily, this is the second time I've looked for this information. There really isn't good at work to determine where the pollution that we have in the state of Wisconsin can be attributed to. We know it's from agriculture. That's been pretty well documented. But we don't know if it's attributed just to CAFOs or more to CAFOs than for the non-CAFO size. At the same time as we have the animal numbers that I cited, we have over 100,000 acres of corn, and those acres have gone up in recent years because as the small farms go out, they tend to rent to the larger operators who are generally on a cash grain basis. So they go corn and soybeans, and it's fairly well documented there's pretty consistent losses of nitrogen from corn. In addition to the corn, we have about 50,000 acres of soybeans and other crops as well that it could potentially be contributing. So those are just some facts from St. Croix County that have to be thought about as to whether, how you'd want to support or not support a resolution from to limit the CAFOs in the entire state. Yeah.
Now, I'd also like to make sure we understand that what this is a resolution in front of the county's association. It's not in front of the legislature. What we would be talking about is making our own recommendation to the county's association to support this 2-year moratorium. And then what would happen, I guess, would be that the county's association would lobby the legislature for a 2-year moratorium. So we would be making a recommendation to the county board to lobby or to sign on to a motion to the county's association to lobby the legislature for a 2-year moratorium. Lot of moving pieces there. Any thoughts and conversation? I'll open it up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Question for you. From what you gave a pretty long and detailed briefing here about reviewing this. Do you see any real solid recommendations as to changes that from this moratorium as drafted that you'd rather see considered by St. Croix County?
Yeah, truthfully, about the same time as I got into the Wisconsin Counties Association materials, and they have a lot of resolutions. I mean, they're a very active group, as you know. And one of the other resolutions that's being proposed for that group is to try to get the association to prompt the state Senate, to take up 13 water bills that have already passed the Assembly that have effect on water. And I have those here, and 2 counties have already passed that resolution, Adams and Pepin. There may be more, but I know of these 2 because they reported it on to me. But there's a number of bills that have been drafted, been debated, and are right there. One of them is to put more technical assistance into counties to address some of these issues. One of them is to work on a nitrate reduction pilot program. So there's other items that are right there that if we could just get the Senate to get back in session to address some of the things that have been, they were right on the cusp. I mean, I remember sitting there thinking they're going to vote on this thing, you know, and then at the end of March, and then it just nothing ever happened. And so it's to the point where at some point they're going to have to convene, and I believe if they convene on something brand new or are asked to do something brand new, they have a whole list of water-related bills that could benefit our state that I would love to see them make progress on. These are some of the things that resulted from the governor's initiative on water last year. So
we would have to take up the Senate, the idea of addressing, asking the Senate to reconvene on the water bills as a separate agenda item in September. Correct. Because that's not an actionable item in this meeting. It's not on the agenda.
Great.
I know a big motivation behind this as far as this county is the Emerald Sky Dairy, am I correct on that name? That they've been violating outside of the scope of the permit they do have, or operating outside of the scope of the permit they do have, excuse me. So I'm wondering how they've been skirting by that, or by what means they've just been allowed to continue to operate.
Yeah, the permit they have a permit in place, okay? That's the one they had from before, and they can expand up to 20% under that permit. And so the Jeff Jackson, our contact, assures me they haven't gone above that number yet. They want to, and they're working on some facilities to go up to, I think, 3,000 animal units or something like that. And they have to get their WPDS permit updated in order to account for the additional manure generated. So, yeah, that's how there's a lot of room for additional, a 20% margin of error is pretty good size, you know, to go over your permit by 20%. But that's the rule, and they're within that. So,
if you don't mind, I would also, just to answer your question, in 2016 there was there continues to be a very strong public interest in a moratorium. And in 2016 it came to a head at the county board, and it very nearly passed. There was a compromise worked out, and the compromise was the ground and surface water study group, the recommendations of which you saw the report on just in the last agenda item. So we continue to take the public's interest very seriously and be accountable. And when this came up, we want to look at it very hard. It's not just the Emerald Dairy. I don't want to ever single out one operator, but there have been spills, and they have been a source of concern by many people. But we're not singling them out just as one business. There are many spills there's lots of spills from, different places, little ones that get addressed as well. I don't mean lots, but there's spills that are concerning throughout the county. I'll keep going. Any other questions?
Yeah, I personally am for this. Just, it doesn't cover everything. It may leave some things out, but it's going to enforce in the state that residents are still very concerned and that not enough is being done. Because I don't know if it's changed or not, but for a while they weren't even looking at the impact of high impact irrigation wells. And I mean, they suck the water right out of the ground, and we could not take that into consideration in our licensing. I don't know if that's changed or not, but I think this keeps this in people's minds. It's not perfect. You're never going to get 70 plus counties all agreeing on the same thing, because each county has its own particular iota, but it conveys that we're concerned and that not enough is being done, and we need to put people first instead of business, because that's kind of what it comes down to. So I'm for this. I realize it's not going to take care of all the problems, but it will keep it on people's minds, and hopefully something's going to get done, and the legislature is going to realize they can't keep avoiding, taking care of the situation.
Other thoughts? I don't hear a motion.
Oh, I'll make a motion to bring this forward to the county board, because I assume we need county board approval in order to move it forward.
Are you talking about using the same format, the same
Yep,
language?
because if we try and change the format, it's just going to get bogged down. And like I said, you're never going to get a format that's going to take care of everybody.
Is there a second? This will not go.
I'll second.
Oh, we got a second. All right. Any further discussion? All right. Moved and seconded that we, using the same document, recommend to the county board that they have the, move this, how would I say this, that we have a resolution forwarded to the Wisconsin Counties Association identical to the Bayfield County resolution. All in favor say aye. 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 All opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Our next order of business is a consideration of Economic Development Corporation funding. And I'd like to frame this conversation. I wrote a memo to you all. This is a conversation about office space. We right now are at a juncture where this building is full and there is no more space to be had. We're talking about building an addition to this building, which is going to cost us upwards of plus $90 million. And we have a tenant in the Community Development Department that we're offering space to in kind, and that's the Economic Development Corporation. And that's been a situation that's been ongoing for over 20 years. When the Economic Development Corporation was founded, it was necessary, and there was plenty of space to be had. And now, there's not space, and the Economic Development Corporation is healthy and doing well and has a reserve fund and lots of members, and it would be a good time to ask them to go rent an office someplace else. So I think you've had a chance to read the memo that I prepared, and I'm wondering what you think. I'd hope to come to the conclusion of making a budget recommendation to the administrator that we maintain their funding at the 2020 level and ask them to locate. We would not include an in-kind donation of office space, and that's where I'm hoping this goes. What do you all think?
I'm going to say one thing is I don't want their 2020 budget touched. I've been occasioned with what happened at the Hudson Library where Roberts had to lay someone off, and now with the Fair Board we cut them. And they had projects planned and they can't do them. So there's no way I want to touch the 2020 budget because we don't know what they have planned and what they will not be able to do. So that is a definite from me. And in regards to space, do they have a lease?
I was waiting to see if the Corp Council would jump in on that one. There was reference to...
Not to my knowledge. I think the county is providing the space for free.
Has this been a verbal thing just like the library situation where it's been a promise? I mean, I don't want to, I'm opening a can of worms, but I don't want to get into that again. So if it you know, do we know how it happened and what happened?
Yeah, the history we were provided with showed the negotiation of the space, what was it, 2006, 2008, somewhere around there. And there was reference to a 10-year lease being signed in 2008, although in the past 24 hours we haven't located that yet. But it would have been expired by now anyways, had there been one.
Wondering how much space do they take? I mean, I guess
How
I
many
don't
square
really know.
feet is that? 1,000 square feet, 1,200 square feet?
I thought it was about 220.
There's two offices. There's two offices.
Two offices.
And then in addition, our department assists with reception area and that kind of thing. And copier, they use our copier, and they get billed for it. So they pay for copying at the same rate we do. What else? Oh, that's about it, I believe.
So has there been any conversation with them about this at all, about them moving out?
Well, I've been as transparent as I possibly could be. I made sure that this document was part of our packet, and they haven't contacted me. So they've seen it, but no.
Is there space in Baldwin, out of curiosity? Because I know we were thinking of closing that at one point, so.
As far as I know, there's space in Baldwin.
Well, I don't believe that since Extension has not been back since COVID pandemic started, but that was remodeled, and I don't believe that they were even fully moved back in when the pandemic started, but there were additional offices. I actually have to look to Julie, I don't know how many, but there were some, as long as they remodeled the one side of the building for Extension, there were some additional spaces created, is my understanding. Including additional conference spacing.
Correct. There is a separate conference room on the Extension side of the suite. There is also, I believe, 2, maybe 3 offices that did not currently, prior to COVID, have any Extension staff in them at all. They didn't have staff that needed them. They were just extra offices because of the layout.
Scott, I'm sorry.
Oh, I've been looking at, checking in, because I made some phone calls to, and I believe that square footage was about 220 square feet that they're currently using. On top of that, though, they do occasionally use some of the other parts of the facility, the conference rooms or things like that too. But if you took the 220 square feet and you calculated out what the space would be on a commercial standpoint with including all the utilities and stuff, you'd probably be at about $20 or a little less a square foot, $18 to $20 for, that would be without any profit. And if you were to take those calculations, you'd be at about $5,000, a little less than $5,000 a year for what that rental rate would be for 220 square feet. The one thing that I do like with them being co-located here is their direct correlation with the community development. Because if they do bring people in and they're communicating things and they have questions as to things that are coming up with their construction, community development is there. I mean, they can bring somebody in, they have all the tools and everything so that they're not talking via Zoom or anything else. They have access to the hard copies and able to print out pages and do a lot of stuff that can make it easier for them if they're bringing somebody in. I really don't know how much they bring people in. I think they do a lot of other background things along with what community development has done. One of the big things that economic development has provided is access. When people come in, they get the information necessary to look at what the demographic information is for the community. Most of this has been compiled by community development, but they have the access and they know where to look, and they're able to have this one-on-one conversations with potential clients coming into St. Croix County. And although all of the bigger cities have their own economic development sections, the advantage with having a county-wide one is that it also provides the service of combining and knowing all the outside influences like of the townships and how is the housing in the townships going to help them with their if they open up a business, say New Richmond or Glenwood City, wherever they happen to decide to locate, you know, that the economic development usually knows what their own community has, but not necessarily what all the surroundings have, and that's something that actually community development has a lot of those details that can be extrapolated and given to people, so that where that's important is when you're opening a business, if you're going to compare to Minneapolis or St. Paul or bigger communities, their cost of housing and everything over there is at a different rate than it would be in Glenwood City. So, you know, you can have a lower pay scale in Glenwood City, yet have the same quality of life because you aren't spending as much on the other things. So it's, when they do it, there's a lot of figuring and cross-referencing that a lot of people do when they're looking to locate their business.
I don't disagree with you at all, but the conversation here is about office space and the need for office space, a $90 million renovation, and finding a creative solution to putting county employees behind desks in county offices, and we have highly paid professionals sitting in a cube farm while we have a nonprofit organization utilizing the offices in their suite. The demographic data that you're talking about is available through a lot of different agencies, collated by Economic Development Corporation. They put their stamp on it and they hand it out on their website. It's easy to get. I'm not diminishing what they do, but it's available pretty readily electronically. So I'm talking about the physical space that we need for county employees, not the mission of the organization, which I don't diminish at all, and I look forward to keeping their budget the way it is and just asking them to go rent another office. This is about office space, not about the mission. They do a good job. God bless them. Let them do a good job in another building someplace else. That's all. I just would like your support in making a budget recommendation that we suspend the in-kind donation of office space. And I'm glad that you calculated that it's not as much as I was afraid that it was. Then I don't worry so much that it's going to be prohibitive for them. Just, I'm asking your support in making a budget recommendation that we end the in-kind donation of office space. That's the bottom line of what. Yes, Sean.
I don't like the idea of changing how they're operating right now. Now is almost the time they're needing more than ever. And as far as office space is concerned, I know one of our first meeting, Ellen was commenting on how well the community development group worked from home, and I know that's not ideal, but I don't believe it's the right time to be expanding departments and adding new positions to fill those offices with county roles.
We're not hiring anybody. We're not expanding anything. We're just utilizing the space that we have. At the same time, we're talking about utilizing the space that's community development department needs. The community development department has been going through growing pains for 6 years as they've added the positions that are already there. We're not talking about adding new positions. We're talking about utilizing the space that's within their office suite. And this is based on my observation, having been on this committee and going into those offices for the last nearly 7 years now. So it's not anybody putting a bug in my ear or anything like that. It's based on now with this renovation, it just, and I talked about finding creative solutions to the, we need to, in my opinion, we need to delay that building project, and we need to find creative ways to utilize the space that we already have. And in the community development department, that would, to me, mean putting community development department employees in all of, utilize the space that we have more efficiently. Therefore, the nonprofit corporation that we're donating space to might be asked to move to a different location. I'm not making any comment on the validity or efficacy of their mission. Just stop giving them space.
So you're basically saying that, like, your number 3, maintain the current 2020 funding with no increases, and they just move to a different area somewhere.
That's just ideal, right? And they're a very healthy organization right now. They have a reserve fund. They have a lot of members. They have an incredibly talented executive director. And I have no doubt that they'll find somebody who'll donate space to them or give them a good deal on space. Good luck. And I'm sure they'll have no problems. So, how long have they been here? 2008, you said? I thought it was longer.
They've been here since the building opened.
They've been here since 1993.
Yep.
That's a long time. So there were fewer employees, and it wasn't an issue we offered to donate the office space. So I think that they've gotten a very, very fair shake from St. Croix County, but now we're talking about bonding $90 million to build out. Let's utilize the space more efficiently and fairly for the taxpayer. And I would ask you to help me give the thumbs up to our administrator. Let's ask them to find another office. That's what I'm asking you, my committee, to do.
I can understand the problem, but if we are going to add on, I should say if/when, we should take into effect that if they can do a better job servicing by being here with community development, we should keep them here and see how that adds on to the building size, and then start charging them rent, or else start charging them a nominal rent next year. But in regards to moving them, it's because we have this possible building going on, it just seems like a lot of musical chairs in a short period of time, and they may end up back here anyhow if we build and we discover that they are doing a better job by being in community development. I don't understand everything that they do and how intricately involved they are. I mean, from hearing some of the people talk, it's advantageous for them to be here. So I don't know, it's like almost studying a little bit more, which is months down the road, and by that time we might as well figure out whether they just want to, I don't know. But I think the timing of this is weird.
It's budget time.
It's budget time. Well, then we can possibly charge them a nominal rent. But I mean,
we're already giving them $120,000. We'd be charging ourselves rent.
Okay, if we're giving them that, then they're up count. Why are we giving them that?
That's a great question, but that's not what I wanted to talk about
Well,
tonight.
what I'm saying though, I mean, if we're supporting them like we are supporting these other things, then they should have an office space in the. Maybe I don't understand what it does, how it fits in with the government, with St. Croix County.
Those are not the questions that I wanted to discuss tonight. I just wanted to open up some office space.
But those are the questions that should be asked to decide where their office space should be. Because if we move them and they find that they can't do as good a job for the citizens of St. Croix County, then that kind of defeats, I don't know. I mean, I understand community development needs more space. Hopefully they'll be how much would this be worth having them leave, Ellen? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Would it be worth what?
Would it be worthwhile having them be someplace else to give you the more office? Are you that cramped where you are?
It'd probably be better not to involve staff with this conversation.
Well, if we don't know how cramped they are and we can't involve staff, how are we supposed to make a decision saying that community development needs more space? So now we're in this vicious circle where we can't get any answers. I think this should be looked at maybe in more depth by different people. And I don't mean to push it off long, but we need some better answers, I think, in order to make a decision. I can understand why something may have to be done, but let's understand everything maybe that's involved with making the decision before we make the decision.
As far as I know, there is no precedent for offering in-kind free office space to any other nonprofit organization, is there? And also, as far as I know, there's economic development is a function which is very effective at the city level and very effective at the state level, and an experiment at the county level. We have economic development being done in River Falls and New Richmond and in Hudson already, and effectively. And at the county level, it's superfluous and redundant, in my opinion. But I'm not trying to defund them. I'm not trying to do anything other than maintain their budget and ask them to find new office space. So, given the fact that we're talking about building out, so if we don't want, if we don't want to move forward with this, I hear Sean and Judy saying they don't want to. We'll just give it a rest. And I'm sorry to have dragged it out this long.
Well, I think if community development needs the space, it's a no-brainer. We just give them the space. I mean, we've been giving them the space before, and if we need it, it's time for them to go. That's my thought. So.
Well, that goes to what I was saying, but you said I can't ask, so I'm stuck in this limbo of not knowing.
It's office space. We're talking about office space. Sean.
Can we move to table this till the next meeting when all of us have a chance to go in the office and see how many people are actually in there?
Right, and I would ask you to consider that some people are working from home. Consider how many people will be there during a fully staffed office, because we won't be working from home forever. That's not the case, so. Please.
You know, 2 points. One, Judy's question, maybe a way to phrase it for Ellen that she could answer would be, how would you utilize the space if it were available to you? And then the second point is, this committee has jurisdiction over the budget for making recommendations on the budget. If it becomes just a space analysis, though, if it says we would like you to leave, that would actually need to go through the administration committee. The admin committee is the standing committee that's vested with space allocation for all county facilities. So budgetary issues, your recommendation does come from here, but if it's just space, then, so if it were option 3, say, if it just becomes space, that request would have to come from the admin committee.
Then we need to forward it to the admin committee.
Yeah. But I mean, if the issue is that community development needs additional space, you can make the ask, but it'll need to route through the admin committee then.
That's where we'll need to send it then. But we need to bring it up next month because we want to talk about it. Sean, is that right, what you're asking? I think we can agree to put it off till next month and bring it back up. That's what we'll do. Thanks for your point. And we'll ask Ellen next month how she'd use the space. I don't want to put you on the spot. All right, I think we've kicked this dog long enough. Are we good? All right, thanks for your forbearance. All right, next up is discussion of fee changes, and we'll turn it over to Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did make a few more after I met with Ken. We actually did make a few more minor changes to the fee schedule. So I'm going to pass around a paper copy for you to look at. They're not extensive, so most of what you saw online, thank you, Julie, is sufficient. And
thank you.
And we did actually, if you did happen to look last night, we did load this change, but we figured you might not have looked, so we wanted to make sure you have the current one.
Oh, so the changes weren't here, because I was saying I have no idea what the changes were, because it was all the same color, and so that these are the changes that we have now?
It was all the same color. The track changes didn't show up, because the whole thing had track changes in it. It always looked like this from the beginning. And what we put online always had track changes. But they didn't show up, yeah.
Well, they didn't have the cross-outs in the new amounts.
Yeah, from the very...
They did, I missed it.
Yeah.
Last night?
I looked at it today, so I...
Okay, and I looked at it before today.
Yeah, this revision replaces one that looked very, very similar to it. But, and as the cover memo said, we put the current fee schedule in with no changes, and then after that, we put in the fee schedule. You had to just keep scrolling down. It said that first there was the 2020 schedule, and then there's the proposed 2021 with track changes. So, all right. Anyway, I'm going to just step up. Thank you. So in an effort to make, and had some really good discussions with staff regarding some of the policies we've had that have always been on this document. In fact, the whole, other than, if you go down through this, only the last 2 policies at the top there on the first page, the first 4 have always been on here. They've been on here for years. They're at the bottom of every single page, and sometimes they got lost. People didn't read them, but they've always been there. Those policies are not new. So there's only 2 new policies. So one is this first one, this one right here. I'll try to number, 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5. That's that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 5 of them have always been on there. I just gave them each their own line. So withdrawal of applications will be refunded at a maximum of 90% of the fee paid. 10% processing fee will be retained. Historically, we start out with what it says right at the top, which is all fees are non-refundable. That is our policy. But things happen. People will apply for a conditional use permit, and then as staff reviews the application, it may be determined that they only need a land use permit or something like that. So we have a partial fee. Someone is told staff will be not very far into it because we don't refund fees if we've gotten to very close to the point where it's going to committee, and sometimes we refund only partial fees. But generally speaking, historically, if we did decide to refund for a valid reason, we've refunded the full amount. On the other hand, that just doesn't seem right, because even determining that there should be a refund does involve quite a bit of staff review. So we feel that we should retain a processing fee, and we have had instances where people have thrown it together because they wanted to beat a deadline and thrown an application in, and then it's got so many problems with it that we have to reject it, and then they want the money back. And that happens because people are thinking, well, I want to get it in by the 1st of the month, so as I don't want to wait another month and do a better job. So this, there just should be a fee, generally speaking, if they're going to try to do that for any reason. So that's my recommendation at that. And then the next one, cancellation requests for campsites. In the past, we have, and especially this year in COVID, and we still want to finish this out through this year, but historically we haven't had that many. This year we've had quite a few, and despite that, we've still had record numbers of record revenue coming in, but we've always reserved the $10 reservation fee. But it is a lot of staff time, especially with our new financial system. There's a lot of steps we have to go through in order to refund money. And so, for the most part, we would like to switch it to giving people a voucher, valid up to 1 year from date of issuance, in order to use to purchase either additional separate camping, passes, watercraft rental, whatever. So we think that would be a better compromise. So those are the only 2 policy changes. As far as the rest of it, like for instance, the fees right there at the bottom, that first page of fees, I actually moved those because part of what I was doing is taking it out of the footnotes and making them more prominent right at the top to make sure they're followed more closely. And then I moved some of the fees from the very back, which for the most part are the same, to this front page. The 2 changes are, we had a couple times this year where normally we're just thrilled that people use credit card, and we have we assume that within our fee structure we built in the cost of the credit card transaction. However, this year we had an instance where someone wanted to put $20,000 on a credit card, and then there was the expectation that some of that money would be refunded. Well, then at that point we've paid $300 in credit card fees, actually probably more, $600 in credit card fees, and we're refunding the full amount. So the county just took a $600 loss. So we didn't at that time agree to do it for that reason, but we feel we should in the future, and that we would retain, or they would, instead of putting $20,000 on a credit card to pay fees, they would put $20,000 plus $600. And most of our transactions are not over $2,000, so this would be the exception rather than the rule. But we don't think the county should take a loss because we accepted a huge credit card payment. So that's that second charge that's on there, 3% of the total charge. We've had more and more public record requests, and sometimes they've provided their own flash drive. Generally speaking, we don't have a problem with that. We do all public record requests, open record requests, electronically if we absolutely can. If we can't, then we do charge, of course, for copies, that kind of thing. But sometimes we have not said what it would be, and we looked into it, and really a flash drive, most of the time when you're doing that, the reason for the flash drive is because the most recent one I did, it was such a huge volume of information they requested, there's no way we could email it. It had to be put on a flash drive. It was massive. And that can happen when you have any court cases, which we tend to have. So whether or not they should provide the flash drive or whether we should provide it, we thought we would put in here a price. We're still just kind of looking into that. Of course, this doesn't take much time at all to load a flash drive. It's very quick, but $15 is typical for a flash drive large enough to hold the amount of data that we can't email. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so those are the only two changes on this page. I'm happy to go through a few more things. We rounded things together a little bit, simplified this a little bit. On the next few pages, this year, as I said in our opening statement, we basically are not proposing any change to our parks fees. Parks fees were raised last year. We always try to keep them in line with the state park system, especially Willow River, which is in our own backyard, and so those are adequate for now. However, we haven't raised any of our land use fees for about 3+ years, 3 to 5 years, and so we went through all of these and basically decided that they probably 5 or most 10%, and the reason for it would even be 10% is simply to keep the numbers simpler. Most of the cases here, we're looking at a 3 to 5% increase, and that's all. I think there was just a couple of really tiny fees where 3 to 5% was like in the $1, $2 range, and it really wasn't worth doing it, so it didn't seem unreasonable to raise it maybe $5, and that technically worked out to 10%. So if you look at these, you'll see for the most part we're talking $5 or $10. That's the kind of amounts we've increasing them, just trying to keep up with inflation and the fact that we do have a lot more activity, we're a lot busier, and we did add a few new permits categories and tried to keep those reasonably priced. Those are things that come from our new Chapter 15 zoning ordinance that needed to be addressed, including planned unit development as an example. The one other thing that we did add on page, I'll go down so you guys can follow along, that I just want to make sure I mention. We've seen this, it's kind of ended up at an oddball spot at the top of this page, 83 in the packet, or if you're looking at it, these are numbered by the packet. So it's an additional hearing fee. Most of the things that go to our Board of Adjustment or the Community Development Committee here cost $1,100. That's our standard fee, which we're not raising. The reason we are saying that is because the Board of Adjustment, if the Board of Adjustment or this committee would request or require an additional hearing, they usually are doing that in addition to saying we want additional information of one kind or another, and usually there's several things they want addressed. A good example is last year when we had the biodigester that went through 3 separate public hearings, very, very extensive, lots of additional information submitted, numerous public comments and exhibits in that fashion. And we get to the point where managing that is extremely time-consuming for our staff. And I feel that it's reasonable to say that when we're talking about a full additional public hearing, not a re-advertising of a hearing because someone had, they got ill and they had the hearing we'd already advertised, we need to postpone to the next month. That's the one that's above that for the $50, $55 change. This is for when we have to go through and write a whole new staff report because we have to include a lot of new information. And so I'm suggesting that we would charge half the price of the $1,100 fee for each additional hearing. So that's a kind of a big change, and I would, appreciate any input you might have. So that is the majority of those, and after that, you'll see there's just a few similar changes for certified survey maps. No changes other than we moved the things on the maps list, kept all those prices the same, and pretty much the only real change on the parks page is an item which was brought up to me by Supervisor Anderson, looking at a request that he had from Bass Lake. I have put a little bit of information in there and would suggest whether or not we would go from having free boat landings that are outside our county park to charging a fee is that we would postpone a further discussion on that until next month to allow anyone who's interested, because I think that is a really big change in the county, to look at some more information and get feedback. So And this, for a little while, I would put on that particular page, that policy regarding cancellation requests for campsites and shelter rentals. I would have it on this page just for convenience for the staff, but that's all. Oh, and special event fees, we need to change that. That has been in our ordinance, but we wanted to clarify in our chart, but we wanted to clarify it a little bit more. And we do have in our Parks ordinance that there is a minimum fee. So, questions?
I don't really have a question, but I do have a comment. I think it's a great thing that you went down with a county sanitary permit for repairs. They're going to be paying a whole lot more for repairing, and it's not their choice to repair. So that was good. Good.
On the daily boat landing pass, you just had Bass Lake and Pine Lake. Are you going to add Squaw or any of the other landings?
So the county has a boat landing in Glen Hills County Park, and so you have to have a fee, or you have to have a daily or annual pass to use that one because it's part of the park. The county has, we operate the Squaw Lake boat landing, but that one is still partially managed by the town, and so I would want to reach out to the town first and ask them what they're thinking. The Bass Lake one is owned by the Wisconsin DNR, and we have a lease agreement that the county operates and maintains it for Wisconsin DNR. The Pine Lake boat landing is wholly owned by St. Croix County, and we operate it for county residents by just St. Croix County Parks. There are other ones in the county, quite a few, but they're all within cities and villages, except for the Perch Lake boat landing, which is operated by the town of St. Joseph, and is a problematic landing that the DNR, the town, the county have all wanted moved for years, but we haven't been able to accomplish that. It's got a lot of problems. So that one's really not something that I would approach, or town totally operates that. There are a few others. There's a boat landing in the town of Troy, and they do charge fees. There are boat land. There's obviously the one that most people are very aware of in the city of Hudson that charges fees also. In our research that I would like to delve into a little more next month, but we can talk about that. We found out a little bit about what the neighboring counties and the communities within St. Croix County charge. And there are a lot of boat landings that are only for various kayaks or canoes or rowboats in the county, the majority. There's also one that I believe is for a little bit bigger boats that's up in the town of Somerset, up on the St. Croix. And I don't know if there's any fee or anything for that. We weren't able to find that out. But it's not really big boats. It's medium, mid to small. Yeah. So I just wanted to focus on the two. Initially, Sean had the request to have this on the agenda in a manner, and we thought this was the most straightforward because the Bass Lake Association, Rehabilitation Association has requested that we consider it. What would we charge? And there are a lot of issues at Bass Lake, but that's not separate on the agenda, so that should be a separate discussion. According to state law rules, we could never charge more than $8 for in-county residents. Non-county residents, you can charge more, but not very much more. And you could have annual or daily, but the state law says that the annual for in-county residents can be no more than 10 times the daily. So $80 at the most. And there's a same is true for non-county residents, no more than 10 times. The city of Hudson charges the maximums. Other places charge a lot less. I would personally have real concerns. I'm very torn about this. I'm not necessarily in favor of it all. I have things for you to think about is that every year I get complaints because Bass Lake in particular does not have any restroom facilities. Also I get complaints because it doesn't have garbage and recycling facilities. We could provide those, but we would have to do them in a certain manner to prevent damage and vandalism, which are very high possibilities with porta potties in that kind of a location. So I have real concerns about that. On the one hand, I could see having a nominal fee to help pay for that and do it in a more expensive manner that would prevent vandalism. On the other hand, I think that we have very few lakes in this county and very few opportunities for people to launch boats, and we really have to ask ourselves if it's appropriate to charge any kind of fee at these couple of sites. So I think that we are putting significant improvements into the Bass Lake Boat Landing this year. I've mentioned those at other meetings. And we are also putting significant improvements into Pine Lake Boat Landing this year. So, you know, there are operational costs that the county is covering. Again, I don't have a position on this yet. And I believe we have a question.
No, I want to make a comment. I don't know if where you were referring to in the town of Somerset, if it was at Twin Springs, we do charge there.
Oh, you do charge there, okay.
Yeah, but I was thinking of the one up, the Somerset Landing up by Marine. That's owned by the Park Service.
Yep. How much do you charge?
It's a $50 annual, or I believe it's $5 a launch.
Ellen, are you looking for us to give you a thumbs up, or do we need a motion to approve?
I would like a motion to approve all the changes, and if you would want to exclude the boat, since I purposely put in a couple different numbers so that you would let us have more time to think about that one.
A discussion on that. What do we think about the boat landing? Should we not have a fee at the boat landing?
Do you have someone at Pine Lake all the time?
No, all of these would
so it's going to be kind of hard to charge if no one's there.
It's just like I'm sure that Ed has no one at his.
We have a pay box and they have stickers, and if they don't put the sticker on, they get towed.
If you're there to catch them and tow them.
Yes, this would be
somebody to enforce it, otherwise it's...
Well, if we're going to do this and we're going to do pay boxes, I'd rather go $5 because otherwise, you know, $3, I don't know, you know, that's just me, but otherwise just nothing for either of those two.
I'll make a motion to approve the fee schedule, but I want to take out the boat landing at Bass Lake for further review.
What about Pine Lake?
Both, well,
the line item. Oh, okay. Here.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve without the boat landings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item on the back of your agenda, if you have it printed. The last one, item number 10. Yeah. Discussion regarding tax deeded property in town of Star Prairie between County Road, on County Road H and the Apple River. And who's leading us in this conversation, Ellen?
Myself again.
Okay.
So this property, which has been taken by tax deed, has been discussed by myself with Supervisor Counter and Supervisor Hanson, that both represent the town of Star Prairie a couple of different times. And so I was asked to, and one of the things that has happened already is that this site had, and I can try to zoom in here, but the site had a burnt out house on it, and that was removed by, the county spent the money to have that removed and have the site basically covered, filled in, and then the property seeded down and erosion control put down. So there are pictures in here that show that, which we can go through in a minute. And you can see kind of on this one that the property is on two sides of the Apple River and on County Road H. And then it looks fairly large when you look at it, and tax-wise, they are paying taxes, I can't show you that, but on over 3 acres. But the reality is, and that's what's explained in our staffing report here, is that the reality is much different. The parcel has about 1.4 acres on one side, 0.93 acres on the other side. The north piece is completely landlocked. There is 3.53 acres that are actually part of the county's road easement or the actual body of the Apple River, which bodies of water in this state are not usually included in lot size because they can't be calculated for total usable property. And when you look at the property, we did refer to it as Chapter 17, but I believe it's a similar zoning for Chapter 15, but the entire parcel is also in the floodplain and in the shoreland, which would significantly limit what could be done with it. It has been restored, as I said. We are trying to find out what was happened with the well and the septic, but we haven't confirmed that yet. We believe it may have been abandoned, at least the well, but we're not sure about the septic. So hopefully the septic was first, not the other way around, but we'll find out. And the reality is that between all those various setbacks and all the other issues, there is very little of this property that is actually usable. And yes, it did have a house on it. The house predated zoning, was very, very old. With all the limitations, there are actually 0.0 acres of land available for a buildable site. So if we trying to get a better idea, but basically what has been presented or suggested that I put in this report is that this committee could consider a recommendation to the administration committee, which, as we already had noted, is the property committee, and then eventually to the county board to retain all or part of the property for public access to the Apple River, or it could try to either donate or sell it for a nominal amount to the Wisconsin DNR for public use, which, based on what's been happening in recent years, would then come back to the county to operate and maintain. And I'll just be frank, if that's the way it was going to happen, the way it did with like the Bass Lake boat landing and other things, I'd rather the county owned it from an operational standpoint, just unless you really want to get that nominal amount of money from the DNR. And that, I understand that there is another factor to that. The nominal amount of money might drop the value, but the town would continue to get some tax base from the DNR, where they wouldn't get some tax base from us. There's a number of years that when the DNR buys land, they continue to pay taxes for a certain number of years. So that would be the other advantage to the county. And we'd probably end up, like I said, I really do think we'd end up operating, maintaining. But as far as looking at it, here is a side view of the property from looking west on County Road H. You guys have all seen these pictures, so I'm going to whip through them pretty fast. These are all looking west, just different perspectives. The bottom picture is looking east. One of our staff went out, took these pictures, and just took more looking west than looking east. And then in the middle of this little narrow piece, there's the address. At some point, they left the satellite dish. And here's one of the perspectives where the house was, and it was removed, as I said. There's also a flag. I believe that would either be looks like the sanitary system to me, and then here would be the well. Or I could have them reversed. It's kind of hard to know. So I suspect that they're both still there because of the stacks. So this shows where the house was removed, the foundation filled in. One thing we had another picture that showed it really well. This is very steep. We had a picture that was taken standing on that, and then showing how steeply it goes down. This picture doesn't do it justice, but I was a lot of space. So it reaches a point where there was some piece of railing put in for some reason. And then there are a variety of steps, first a few, and then they get to these wooden ones, which are here, that get down and go down and then come out about here, showing the land that's along the river. And this is another perspective. You can see, and then I mention it as you look at the rest of it, there is a lot of debris that was left on the property by the previous owners, a lot, and it really needs cleanup, regardless before flooding in the spring. But it also, you can see, if you look beyond the debris, is a very beautiful spot and would probably be very, very popular for shoreline fishing, trout fishing to wade in, canoe, kayak access, even a pretty little picnic area. So those are some possibilities. So any questions? This is pretty much everything I know about it right now. I believe Scott can add and Dan can add a little more information. Okay.
Well, I think Ellen did an exceptional job at getting the word out about what it is, but the concern is if this goes back to the market, that the property is not buildable, and it would have a pretty convoluted permit if they were ever to try to do anything, where there's just way too many things that would have to be waived. The way the existing house was probably 6-8 feet from the road right away, from the front of the garage door. And then from the back of where that house was a matter of just a few feet to, that's probably about a 40-foot drop going down to the water. So it's pretty steep. The house that was there was extremely small to begin with, so anybody that would have been purchasing it would have wanted something larger than what the footprint was that was there. So I think Ellen did a good job of describing too what the use is as far as for fishing, small access to have a small gravel lot, and just to pull a couple of cars off the road and be able to have a picnic table or whatever, and then a trail access down to the water for fishing. I don't know.
So what we'd need to do is probably ask the administration committee to approve retaining this property and turning it over to community development, or community development department for future development into a little low impact recreation area. And I would look for a motion to that effect if you're so inclined.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of points. I dealt with the insurance side of it when the property burnt down. So it was taken on tax deed, and then 10 days later the structure burned. So actually probably a series of unfortunate events that was rather fortuitous for us, because the amount of the insurance settlement, now that the county owned it, exceeded the amount of the cleanup cost and the back taxes. So actually we were made whole on this through that insurance claim. So that's one of the probably benefits of this idea, is that we're not out any money in order to change the ownership of it to retain it as a county property. Two is the property burned down, I think it was in January or maybe right at the beginning of February. The property burned, and we kind of forgot about it with all the COVID pandemic stuff. And I wanted to thank Chair Hansen for bringing it back to our attention and pointing out that it was still a hazard there that we hadn't really been doing anything with. So we got on it quickly and we took care of that. But thank you for bringing that back up for us. And then the final point would be, it is the admin committee that would make that determination, but considering the factors that we talked about and the uses for it, I think that is a good use. I think Corp Council had weighed in that you could rebuild in the exact same footprint, but no greater than that. So if you put it back on the market, somebody may want to try to do that, and I agree there are a whole lot of issues with that. So it might be best, considering maybe one of the other lawsuits that we've recently settled, not to even entertain that idea.
If I could make a point, one of the missions that we were charged with the mitigation funds were shoreland preservation, and one of the missions of the Land and Water Committee, which we are, which the state charges us with, is shoreland preservation. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to participate in fulfilling that mission, because this land straddles the Apple River, which is a key component of the St. Croix watershed. What a great opportunity. So I think it fits perfectly the mission of the Land and Water Committee, which we are. So again, I'm hoping for a motion to send her over to the administration committee with the request that we retain the property to let the community development department develop it to a low-impact recreation area, if anybody would be so inclined.
I would move to recommend to the administrative committee the retaining this property and trying to think of how else to put it. For a low impact recreation area.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Next up would be announcements, I think. Announcements and correspondence.
I just would like to announce that the household hazardous waste, which will now finally have some money that will come out of the budget, that's scheduled for September 24th and 25th. Households will be a part of each day, and very small quantity generators, businesses, et cetera, will be in the morning of the second day. So that same day at others locations throughout the county will be both the tire, appliance, and electronics collections.
Say the date again.
September 24th and September 25th, and I believe the tire and appliances are only on the 25th. Is that right, Tim? Just nod or shake your head. What? Yeah, so I think they're all on Friday the 25th. So it's a little different this year. We're not having a Saturday. It just had to do with a variety of changes. We did change vendor this year, so on some of these things.
And our next meeting is 9/18, so we'll be able to plug that one more time.
Yes.
Good. Other announcements and correspondence? Future agenda items. I'd like to talk about the possibility of having a resolution requesting the Senate to come back into session to bring up the water bills.
I actually have a list I've been so if you wanted to hear them.
Yep.
Our staff, as was mentioned by Cole earlier, they're very close to being done with the spill response plan, and they would like to have that on the next agenda for committee review. I want to know if you would like to bring back the boat landing fees discussion. I'm seeing nods from, okay. As John mentioned, there will be a public hearing on changes to Chapter 15 maps, as was discussed. The CAFO moratorium, I believe, will go forward without, we'll just write it, and it can be without being further reviewed, since you already know it'll just be, instead of Bayfield, it'll be St. Croix, so that won't need to be on the agenda. The water bills, and then further discussion on economic development space, or that might be modified somewhat in how you want to word it, but something like that next month. Okay, so those are the things I have. Oh, and of course, budget, correct? Yes, and budget, yeah. So.
When is WCA conference? Do we have time to talk about that in this committee again before it becomes, do we have time for the county board to talk about that before the WCA conference?
Yeah, it's in September. I don't recall the exact date, though. Yeah. The county board meets before then in September.
Okay, they need to approve it for it to be before we can recommend it as a resolution there, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other agenda items, folks? Okay, date of the next meeting is September 18th, as I said. Is that right, Julie?
17th, according to my calendar.
Is that right? What was I looking at? Date of the next meeting is September 17th, according to Julie's calendar. I thought we had a Gregorian calendar, not a Julian calendar. Okay. I think we stand adjourned. That was a good joke. I'll end on a high note.